Hi, welcome to Two Bi Guys. Before we get into it today, I wanted to say that we have a very special episode, and it's a little different. I had the privilege of speaking to some elder members of the bi community, which was a rare treat. ABilly S. Jones-Hennin has been a queer activist since the 70s and a civil rights activist even longer than that, and his husband Cris Hennin-Jones has been by his side for over 40 years. I feel very lucky that I got to speak with both of them and that we made it happen. And going into this interview, I wanted to ask ABilly and Cris about their experiences with bisexuality, their activism, how the LGBT community has changed over time, how ABilly helped create multiple advocacy organizations for minority rights, what it was like organizing pre-internet, and much more. And you'll notice I didn't actually ask all of those questions directly, but the conversation did end up covering all those topics. As many of you know, I've been working on a side project interviewing bi married men to compile an oral history of that experience. And without realizing it, this episode ended up looking more like one of those sessions. I ended up mostly listening and letting ABilly and Cris talk about whatever they felt was important, and I learned so much as a result. Both ABilly and Cris were in marriages or relationships with women before they married each other. They've navigated their bisexuality in tandem with openness and polyamory. And so, no matter your experience with queerness and relationships, I am sure you'll enjoy listening to their story and hearing the bits of wisdom they've acquired along the way. The conversation went over time, so I split it into two. Here is part one of my interview with ABilly and Cris, and stay tuned for part two next time. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to Two Bi Guys. I'm here today with a couple of bi activists, bi elders who have done some great work in the community. I'm joined by ABilly S. Jones-Hennin and his husband, Cris Hennin-Jones. ABilly has been an LGBT activist for over 4 decades. He co-founded the DC Coalition in 1978, which led to the formation of the National Coalition of Black Lesbians and Gays, the first national advocacy organization for African American LGBT people. In 1979, he helped mobilize the first national march on Washington for LGBT civil rights. He is a founding member of Gay Married Men's Association and the National Association of Black and White Men Together, which I want to ask you about. ABilly has been active in AIDS education since the 80s, serving as director of minority AIDS programs for the National AIDS Network, among multiple other initiatives. He recently chaired the DC Mayor's LGBT Advisory Committee, and I'm sure there's much more that we will get into. And he is joined by his husband of over 40 years, Cris Hennin-Jones, who is also involved with a lot of that advocacy work that I just mentioned, and possibly more that we'll get into. Thank you both so much for joining me. Welcome to Two Bi Guys, ABilly and Cris.
I would like to note for the record that GAMA, the Gay Married Men Association, now refers to themselves as the Gay Bi
Ah,
Married
amazing.
Gay/Bi Married Men Association, which has been a lot of work for it to come that way, but it's a reality.
That's awesome because one of my side projects of this podcast has been interviewing bi married men. And I think they're very underrepresented. Many are in straight appearing marriages and don't have resources. And so that's awesome. I definitely want to talk to you more about how the advocacy has changed, because I use the word gay a lot in that intro, but I know that you identify as bi, and the work has shifted over the years. So before we get to that, let's just start with both of you. How do you identify? What pronouns do you use? How would you like to identify yourselves?
Christopher?
Well, my sense is that it's I guess it's controversial, but my sense is that we start out by we're exploring our sexuality, and And then, we encounter some bumps along the way that will make us shift in one direction or another. I look at it more as the challenge of not only being bisexual, but being bi-emotional, bi-spiritual, bi-intellectual, and trying to keep an equilibrium of relationships with men and women over the course of my life. When it comes to exclusively the bisexual part, I know that before meeting Billy, I was married for 8 years. And before being married, I made sure that my ex-wife was also bisexual, because I didn't want things to get complicated. I think I was lucky. I'm a generation before my partner, in the sense that I think that
after you.
Right. I'm sorry. Sorry.
You're not older than me.
Right. But by the time I came around to relating and marrying and dealing with those issues, I think I was already aware of bigger bumps along the road as far as relating to people. And I definitely didn't want to get into a marriage that was going to be a closed marriage. I made sure that before we got married that we were both acknowledging that we were bisexual and that we were going to have an open relationship. And I think that when I met Billy, at least intellectually, we were on the same plane. I met Billy through two organizations. One was the Bi Group in Washington, D.C. at the time, and the other was the Gay Married Men's Association. And he also had started an organization called Growth and Support. And for me, that was a real opening to being able to at least foresee how I was going to negotiate this whole business of being sexual. And interestingly enough, I was 28 when I met Billy, and I was definitely deeply conflicted, because I'd had an open relationship that had in effect been closed. And because it had been closed, I was definitely really beginning to feel a bit psychotic. It was sort of pushing the parameters of my sense of equilibrium. And when I actually called him the first time, I asked him, is this organization an organization of men who are married to men, or is it an organization of men who are married to women who are also gay? And I was definitely ready for the latter, as far as balancing things out. I think that, I didn't really think, well, I think we did. I think we both felt at the time that we could continue being married and continue and have a relationship with at least one man that would include being sexual with him. That's where we were at the time.
Interesting.
We have probably tested many labels, from being poly to being pansexual, but have always had an open relationship, an honest relationship. I identify as a queer bisexual in a same gender loving relationship. So that's embracing a lot of labels, and it's an open relationship and remains an open relationship. We both have had female companions along the way and male companions along the way. I'm usually the one to get jealous and tell them, okay, your time is up, time to go now. And I'm saying that because having an open relationship does bring about its challenges. It doesn't mean that you won't get jealous. It's exploring, okay, what's this jealousy coming from? And users just feeling insecure, or I try to make sure that friends know that my commitment is to Christopher. And yes, it's an open relationship, but the glue that holds us together is commitment. And unfortunately, some companions that I have decide to push that button and change the dynamics of it. And often I have to end it. the relationship. They would start off saying, "Oh, I'm fine, not an issue," but it turns out that it is. And I in my era when I became an activist, you were either straight or gay. No one talked about being bisexual.
Uh-huh.
So my coming out, I defined myself as a gay man. And it took a lot of reading and interacting with others before I evolved to defining myself as bisexual. And what's interesting is in the communities and groups that I was with, that everyone knew that I was married. Everyone knew that I had kids. I often had my kids with me at LGBTQ events. So I wasn't in the closet about being married. I was married for 14 years, but my wife clearly wanted a monogamous relationship. And we
Hmm.
remained friends, but the open relationship just did not work for her. So that's how, it's actually just evolving. I start off saying I was straight. Uh, then they evolved and saying, "Oh, I'm gay," and then they evolved and saying, "Well, I do believe I'm bisexual," and I was more closeted about being bisexual than I was about being gay because I would get all sorts of pushback from members of the gay community who would poo poo bisexuality. And I still get that. I still get, open jokes about it. Oh, you're just being fashionable. Come on, when's the last time you've been in a relationship with a woman? All sorts of, I mean, it's an ongoing effort to educate our friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is part of evolution. I think that just learning how to be fully sexual on an emotional, intellectual, and spiritual level really almost requires you to be bisexual in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
And I really appreciate the journey of having found people over, from college on that have actually taught me, given me their perspectives of exploring, trying to figure out how to be fully sexual in healthy ways.
Can you explain a little more what that means? And does it relate to what you said before about bi spiritual and bi intellectual or the other terms you used? What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. It's the difference between having sex with a man in the alley and having sex with every with your emotional, spiritual, and intellectual capacity to really explore what's going on. You know, what are these feelings? What do they mean? Where are we going with them? And I think it's important to be able to do that with women as well.
Can you have sex with that man in the bathhouse instead of the alley?
Well, yeah, one of our biggest fights was that I'm a farm boy on a certain level, and when we first met, he had a motorcycle and taking me to New York City, and I kept on wanting him to stop somewhere, and so that we could make love in a forest. And in those days, he took me right to New York City and took me to a St. Christopher Street bar and wanted to make love in a toilet stall.
Different strokes for different folks.
and and
Exactly.
and it was it was really hard to know, is this love, or do you really have to love someone to do make love in a toilet stall? I mean, it was but it's all part of doing the work
Yeah.
and deciding that your commitment is more than basically jerking off, and really exploring how another person functions and what motivates them, what their traumas are, what their blockages are, and how you can function in a more healthy way together and support one another. And
Yeah.
it's quite a journey. There's no doubt. And whether it's been relating to women or to Billy or to different lovers that I've had, it's definitely been a central theme of just getting to know one another better and being more honest with one another.
Yeah.
And my bisexuality can also be expressed in terms of fantasies that I might have.
Hmm.
Uh, I had a friend of mine that we had sex just once, long time ago, but we're still good friends. And somehow she decided to get into a discussion about pussies, and she was talking about her pussy. And then that night, I just had dreams about all the different kinds of pussies and what they look like. And I was like, what is going on here? But it just, that's a part of being bisexual. I can have dreams about vaginas and pussies, or I can have dreams about penises, certainly a lot of different kinds of penises, right? And yeah.
Yeah. I identify with what both of you are saying so much because when I came out as bi and explored it, it really led to so many other levels of sexual health and well being and exploration beyond just a gender binary and, a new comfort level with sexuality. But I'm curious because you guys, were activists in decades ago for 4 decades. Even now, there's not that much bi representation, maybe a little more lately, but back then it was very binary, gay and straight, even more than now. How did you realize you might be bi? And like, did you have role models or other people you looked to, or did you figure it out some other way? And what was it like to come out back then? Did you come out as bi or not really?
Well, let me just note one thing. My activism did not start in the 70s or with LGBTQ community. I was active, very active in the civil rights movement during the 50s and 60s,
Ah,
and eventually became involved in the LGBT community, primarily because of racism
hmm.
in the community as a whole, and being frustrated with that, and not finding at the time any black persons that were active, at least in the district. And I had moved there from California to Maryland, and I was like, this is supposed to be Chocolate City. Where are my folks? And put an appeal out. But, so I grew up with activist family that were very involved in the civil rights movement. Activism then was very different. We didn't have internet, and we didn't have cell phones. We weren't
Yeah.
looking for Wi-Fi. Uh, we had old-fashioned telephones that you called people, and you put flyers up, and a lot was word of mouth of contacting. I initially reached out by simply placing an ad in the Washington Blade, the gay newspaper here, and called for a meeting that convened where I was working. I was then a counselor at Special Approaches with Juvenile Assistance in DC, working with youth that have been homeless or otherwise displaced, runaway and homeless youth. And people came, showed up, and it just grew from there with the National Coalition having chapters all across the country, um, from the East Coast to the West Coast, North and South. It was pretty amazing You know, I don't know if I didn't certainly didn't make an announcement. I just started defining myself as bisexual, and I did have a role model, a woman, ironically, Lorraine, who was identifying herself as bisexual, and we were friends. And by reading what was available and eventually meeting others, and I think Gamma also was an eye opener because the men that came, many of them did identify themselves as bisexual. And of course, they were in marriages, and many were open to their wives, some were not open to their wives, and having all sorts of different models of how they expressed their bisexuality. And it was also a reality that you could be, even if you had not related to the same gender or another gender, you could still define yourself as bisexual because of your feelings, your emotion, and your fantasies, whatever, however way you decided or came to that conclusion that you were bisexual, and you come to that conclusion in many, many different ways. So when I met Christopher, he was already defining himself as bisexual, and I was definitely in a marriage, and he actually helped me evolve to defining myself as bisexual.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the difference between Billy and I is that he is the activist. He's the one who's done the political work, the lobbying, the footwork of organizing and finding all these different people who've had experiences and have wanted to share them. I'm basically kind of a combination of a city boy and a country boy. And having grown on a farm, one has, I think, more what I would call spontaneous or maybe natural experiences sexually. I mean, I still remember at the age of 5 with a bunch of my brother's friends, and we'd go up into the dunes and get all naked and suck each other off. I mean, it was something that was possible. That God knows if it would ever be possible nowadays, but in those days it was possible.
Mm-hmm.
And we had serious relationships, not sexual, but affection, what I would call relationships with our animals. I mean, my horse or horses, my dogs, my cats, they were all members of my family. And being on a farm and all the toughness that one goes through being on a farm, our family, my parents were fairly stoic, and they were not terribly affectionate. So between my brothers and my sisters and our animals, that's where we found our affection. And when I began to realize that sex was good and that I really enjoyed it and wanted to know more about it, I confronted my church with it to begin with, and then the Catholic academy that I was in, and I realized that for God knows what reason, sexuality was never really something that was deeply and profoundly addressed by the church, and I was deeply fanatically religious until I was about 11 or 12. And then I just had to throw it all away. It just didn't make any sense. It just seemed to be a huge contradiction that I had learned, all of these acts of love and acts of humility and all these beautiful acts. But when it came to sex, it was like you threw it all out the window and and suddenly became, the devil or whatever. And I was fortunate that the academy that I went to was advanced enough that they basically came to my parents and basically said that I was much too precocious for what they had to offer, and that they should find another another place to send me, and that my parents were able to send me to a much more uh, challenging school as far as helping me find literature. I remember reading books like D.H. Lawrence's Lady Chatterley's Lover, and just slowly but surely finding those little bits and pieces of literature that actually were addressing a more integrated male, female, male, male, female, female ability to be bisexual, bi-emotional, bi-intellectual, etc. So when I met Billy, I was definitely going through a really deep depression. And here was somebody that was actually basically telling me, well, that's just the beginning of dealing with all of this that you've gone through. What you really need to do is get out there, share your experiences, and learn from other people who have similar experiences, and let's get on with it. And one of the really beautiful things that I experienced with him was that it was a time where there were all these regional gay and lesbian meetings at different universities up and down the East Coast. And for me, it was just thrilling to listen to people who were worked cleaning up bars, falling in love with university professors, or there was this couple that was God knows upper Navy guy who fell in love with one of his cadets, and just talking about all the challenges of inside personal, just working through it together and making it happen, and then protecting themselves from all the prejudices that existed in the status quo, and tended to make things extremely difficult and dangerous.
It is one of the joys, I think, of being bisexual or any part of the LGBTQ community is that we seem to have no problem crossing class lines, racial line, and I find that to be the richness of our community. We seem more readily to cross the class line than we are the racial line. There's still folks who, even within the African American community, that have problems with interracial couples. And I think a big part of it is you're more likely, the media is more likely to show an African American in an interracial relationship than they do show African American in relationship with another African American. So
Hmm.
that's how the media presents us, which is
Mhm.
unfortunate.
Hmm. Actually, I want to ask about that, but I also, since it came up, can you guys tell us the story of how you met and fell in love?
It was over the phone. we, were, we, were,
Really?
we were pretty modern, but no, I was basically trying to figure out what these different organizations were about, and it just happened that Billy was on the phone hotline for the Gay Married Men's Association, and so we had a nice little talk. I loved his voice, and
I had a very sexy voice then.
he did. He had a very seductive type of voice, and calming, and also he seemed to be knowledgeable and very positive. And so I made an appointment and went to the first meeting, and he actually had a man in his arms, and I had a man in mine. But he suggested in that meeting that we should have a weekend retreat, and wanted some volunteers, and I immediately volunteered, and we ended up about a week later having a 6-hour intense planning session for this weekend retreat of a group of men with, at the time, an eminent medical sexologist. And Billy went on and on because he does and continues to have this all-inclusive vision of, if we're going to be different, we're going to have to be all-embracing to diversity, which is something that I have had immense respect for him for.
Hmm.
But in this planning meeting, I was getting a little bit annoyed because I was hoping that we could get into something intimate. So we go through 6 hours of discussing every parameter, from what at that time was transvestites to transsexuals to almost everything that's now way out in the open, but wasn't then. And at the 10 minutes before he had to get back to his wife, he looked at me and he said, well, maybe we still have time for a 10-minute quickie.
It was 20 minutes.
It was 10 minutes.
20 minutes.
Well, you made it 20 minutes. But,
And the rest is history.
after the 20 minutes, I basically told him, we definitely need to revisit this in a more. So he scheduled me about 2 weeks later. No, he actually scheduled me probably in the same week, but rescheduled like twice. And by the time he rescheduled, I didn't believe he was actually going to come. So I had already made some other arrangements, and suddenly he appears, all ready to spend the night. And I told him I was really sorry, but he hadn't confirmed, and so I had him stay in my apartment, and I locked the doors.
He locked me in the apartment,
and I went
with the cat. It was me and the cat. And the cat's staring at me, and I'm staring at the cat.
Oh my God.
So yeah, our initial years were very bumpy. I mean, we're both very different people. We both come from pretty different backgrounds, so that we really did need to really work on figuring out, how we were going to make our relationship practical.
And the funniest part about relationship, there are many, but one of them was when his wife came. She lived in Mexico, and I knew she was coming, but I wasn't quite sure the date. And so when I came to the apartment, I realized he and his wife were in the bedroom sleeping. So I was like, what do I do? And I sit on the sofa and I start fuming. My boyfriend is in there with his wife. Of course, I had just come from my girlfriend.
Not your girlfriend, your wife at the time.
No, that was from Lorraine's.
Oh. Okay.
But anyway,
Now I know.
anyway, so I'm fuming, and then the cat decides it has to use the litter box, and it annoyed me. And so I jump up, go in the room, grab the litter box, and I run with the litter box into their bedroom, and I dump the cat litter with fresh poop and pee on top of both of them. And then I run out of the bedroom, and he chases me with no clothes on, and I'm out in the hall.
Running away into the elevator.
Running into the elevator. It was high drama. So I come back, we sit on the sofa, he's talking. And meanwhile, his wife comes up and she said, well, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I thought this is something gay men do. So we get everything all cleaned up, and then the three of us went to bed. In a water bed. It was a water bed, so we could just.
Wow.
And I was kind of in a place thinking, well, he must really love me to do something like that.
I was gonna say, how'd you get from that to
That was an example of jealousy.
Sometimes you have to deal with jealousy.
Well, it was definitely for me a really good example of the contradictions that you have when you're exploring diversity, in the sense that Billy had always talked about open relationships and all the possibilities and everything. But it's one thing to have a theory about it, and it's something altogether different at times to actually putting it into practice. And that takes discipline,
Yeah.
and it really takes putting your emotions and your intellect and your spirit and applying it to figuring out, okay, am I jealous because I'm insecure, or because I don't know this person, or because I don't know myself? And are these things, untouchable,
Right.
or are these things really important to explore and to find solutions to? And the
Yeah.
truth of the matter is that we basically grow through our relationships with other people. But if we can't take it back to ourselves and relate better to ourselves, I mean, actually get our emotions in sync with our intellect and our body, and make sure that we're going in positive directions rather than being self-destructive, then we're evolving, and if not, we're stagnating.
Yeah. Yeah.
The reality is that bisexuality can be very complicated. It can be very challenging and at the same time very rewarding. I think the fact that we can be open to relationships with transgender persons, with women, as well as with men, is rewarding.
I couldn't agree more. I want to get back to what you mentioned, ABilly, which is sort of the intersection of race and the queer community and diversity within it. So you founded the group Black and White Men Together. So I'm curious, like, what was the need that you saw that you wanted to fill by creating that? And then I also heard that you and Cris co-facilitated a session recently that I'm heard through the grapevine went very well. So I'm curious of just about that group and how it's evolved and why you think it's successful.
Just for the record, I am not the founder of Black and White Men Together. Michael Smith, who is now deceased, is the founder, but I was one of the founding members of the National Association of Black and White Men Together.
Okay.
Um, that now has chapters and individuals, and it was a wonderful and still is a wonderful way for persons who are in interracial relationship, not exclusively black and white. It can be uh, with any race other than one's own race or ethnicity. And so it brings the organization is brings together folks on a social level, and very strongly also a political level as a way to identify and take action as it relates to issues of discrimination. The committee that I happen to be working with now through BWMT is the voter suppression group, trying to address work as it relates to fighting voter suppression, which is just about in every state almost. There, some sort of regulation has been passed to limit democracy in regards to voting as opposed to expanding the right to vote. So Cris and I were on a panel that had couples of three different variety. He and I were there as a black and white couple that have been together for an extended period of time and in an open relationship. Another couple was there because of the intersectionality of age. There was quite a bit, very wide range of age between them, something like 20 years
20 to
between
30.
them. And another couple was there because intercontinental. Where did Jerry live?
One was from Virginia, I think, and the other one was from Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
a small town in Czechoslovakia.
So it was three interesting couples and we were sharing our experiences. On all three of us, of course, and just happened to have been, yeah, black and white couples, but with very different experience that we had. So again, we're not a homogeneous group by means, but
we're homogeneous. I think in a way, in a sense that we're breaking ground. We're all breaking ground in some form or another.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the exciting things for me in relating to Billy is that there are no limits to the ground that we could break. I mean, he really helped me because when I first met him, I really thought, okay, I'm going to be gay with you, and I'm not going to have any more kids. I'm not going to have kids, and I'm going to, I had a narrow view of what was possible in a relationship with a man.
Hmm.
And he quickly made me realize there are no limits. You really have to figure out what you want and go for it. And again, being pretty much of a my roots are somewhat a combination of being a country and city boy, and I was trying to create roots in my own way. And actually, Billy introduced me to a lesbian couple, and through a lot of work with this couple, we ended up having two incredible kids, in addition to the incredible kids that Billy already had. And just the dialogue and the growth and having a multifaceted family like that, I think ended up being a huge contribution to the next generation.
And we now have we have five kids. I came into the relationship with three kids, two adopted. My former wife and I had adopted two kids, one biological kid, and then with Cris, two kids through alternative fertilization. So whoever thinks we can't have children, take notes. That
Mm-hmm.
we can be very creative about it. And what I noticed, at least in Washington D.C. where we live, it's not unusual to see two men with small kids and or two women with small kids. And a lot of the men that came to Gamma that still comes, because Gamma is still going, often remained in their marriage because they had children, but still could be open and bisexual, at least with their spouse. But it's an education component to it. I mean, I think our kids are much more open minded than most kids because we've been open about who we are. Yeah.
And they're probably more open even than we were, in the sense that for them, conceptually, it's a given. While for us, we had to break ground and make it happen.
And I'm often asked the question, well, at what age should you let your kids know that you're bisexual, gay, or lesbian? And I say, right from the beginning. You start from the beginning, you know?
Yeah, because that's where prejudices begin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Everything you all just said, and your large family, and the idea of no limits when it comes to having kids or anything about a relationship is such a bi thing, and I think that's the title of this episode.
Well, let me get back to
Wait.
the race thing.
Well, let me just make one point before you get into the racing.
No, I want to make my point.
I know you do.
I'll let you two decide who goes first.
I think that one of the things that was helpful in being bisexual and having an open relationship with my partner Billy was that it also entailed how we can relate and be accountable for everything that's going on. And I felt pretty much that as far as vision and as far as context, he definitely gave me that freedom to live without limits. On the other hand, uh, I'm the type of person that really needs to put everything into practice in order for it to make any sense to me. And I found very often that when I would put something into practice, suddenly he would find some objections. And for me, that was really interesting because, we were beginning to learn that making oneself accountable to exploration is the work. And you definitely have to, what's it called, have one another's back when you're going through these types of things so that you're actually processing them instead of, going blindly forward and not being accountable to consequences. I'll let you go on that.
I just wanted the intersectionality of race
Hmm.
has been an interesting component for both of us. But for me, a large part of my activism did start with having to deal with issue of racism back in the early days when you would get extreme. You couldn't enter places because they would find a reason for you not to be able to. When there was carding for age, there was also carding along racial lines, and it's an interesting challenge that we deal with. I think the LGBTQ community has become more accepting of interracial couples, but I find that I still have to deal with the fact that I am in an interracial relationship within the African American community. I'm told, given lines that you're sleeping with the enemy. And while I acknowledge that white supremacy is definitely real, but your
Yeah.
heart is your heart. And you fall in love, you don't tell your heart who to fall in love with. And yeah, Cris and I fell in love. We went from a 20 minutes quickie, not 10. Uh, so, to,
CP time.
to 44 years, they've been together 44 years. I'm
Wow.
79 now, and folks used to tell me that I was rocking the cradle. But now we continue to meet people that the age gap is even wider than what we were. Cris is 71, I'm 79. But like I said, with this couple, they were like 20 years or more of age difference apart.
I would also say that, one of the things about being in a relationship with no limits is that you definitely go through being one another's lover, brother, sister, mother, father, grandmother, grandfather over the years, and it's almost like everything that you've previously experienced, you apply to what you need to be in the moment of relating to one another.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I like about being with Cris is that he's open to changes and he's a good listener. So he's open, as much open as I am in terms of addressing, confronting prejudice along racial line, sexual line, age line, and he really is the wind beneath my wings. That in that a lot of my friends have never met him, and they or when they meet, they're still. I still have friends that have never met him. They think I'm making him up, and
That's funny.
uh, it's funny. We had that experience recently with when we went to the senior event, and someone said, "Oh, you really to have a partner. Uh, but
Well, one thing that I think we learned along the way was not to get in each other's way.
yeah,
Hmm.
he gives me my space. I have my space. He has his space. He has friends, and I have my friends. Some of my friends don't care for him. Some of his friends don't care for me, but we don't push it. I mean, vice versa. I don't. He has friends I don't care for. And I have friends he don't care for. So we have friends that we can interact with together, and others we just. It doesn't mean we should not have friends that the other person doesn't like.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is really important is that I've learned over the years that we each need very often different kinds of people to address different challenges that we have in life. And I feel that when I first met Billy was he was a charismatic leader. I mean, he could handle a crowd and deliver really deep, serious issues and have people really listen to them. But I felt like on a personal intimacy level, he never made time for it. And for a number of years, I really almost pushed him to have more intimate relations with people that he wanted to have relationships with in order for him to learn to be more intimate. And
Yeah.
and and he also gave, thankfully gave me the same freedom. I mean, I had one lover that I had over 30 years, and the first time Billy met him, he Billy sat him down and asked him, "What are your intentions?" So then he felt like,
Why are you here?
and
Like dad on a prom date or something.
right, and my father, my friend Ernie, basically said, I'm basically here to figure out what my intentions are, which was
Good answer.
which was a really good answer. But
Yeah.
at the time, Billy was so busy that literally he and I only had like one evening or one night a month where we were actually able to be intimate.
Hmm.
And we both had really heavy duty careers. So, and I traveled a lot and he traveled a lot.
Wow.
So, managing a relationship under those stresses, he was responsible for 3 kids and an ex-wife, and I was responsible for him and my career and trying to get, the basics down, getting a house together and deciding to have kids myself. It's pretty intense. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work.
One of the things that we realized, we actually have more female friends than we do male friends. I'm not sure how that's happened. I guess, I mean, but we actually have very close relationship with women. But well, it's not a but. It's just interesting that it has turned out to be that way. Cris is much more of an introvert than I am. I'm much more of an extrovert. He likes very small, intimate get togethers, and I like to invite the whole world, everybody. And when we first met, we would have little socials, and his friends would come early, and my friends would start coming in at 10 or 11.
And I would be chasing them out by 3 or 4. I still have the reputation of chasing them out in my dirty underwear
They
at
weren't
3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
They were holy, had holes
Okay,
on. I
holy,
don't know why he
holy.
had them on. Comes out and chases everybody out. I still get
I've
reminded
met
of
you
it.
all. You're all really nice, but time to go home.
That's
But a
funny.
lot of it had to do
Um,
with intimacy issues. I definitely needed somebody that in those days I needed somebody to hug at night. I needed my bear, and he was often you know too busy writing speeches and going to God knows where, giving those speeches.
And now I spend most of my time mediating conflict. People call me up and ask me, would you mind help kind of mediate this, mediate that?
Hmm.
And I spend a lot of my time doing that, active with Black Lives Matter locally here, with the disability community and the senior community. And so even though I'm retired, I find myself sometimes as busy as ever. Yeah.
Awesome.
And the bisexual community also keeps me active.
Thanks for listening to part 1 of my chat with ABilly and Cris. Stay tuned for more next time on the season 3 finale of Two Bi Guys. Can you believe it? In the meantime, I'm also hosting a new interactive talkback show on Fireside, which is a live audio chat app. The show is called Ask a Bi Guy, and it's an opportunity to get involved in this conversation, build some bi community, ask me questions directly if you want, and share some of your story if you feel comfortable. So if you're listening to this on Monday, November 8th, the day it comes out, I'm doing a show tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. There will be another show in 2 weeks on Monday, November 22nd. And I will continue doing these shows in December while Two Bi Guys is on a brief hiatus before season 4. So go download Fireside. It's only available on Apple at the moment, but hopefully in more places soon. Search for Ask a Bi Guy or Robert Cohen and subscribe to be notified about future shows. See you there. Two Bi Guys is edited and produced by me, Rob Cohen, and it was created by me and Alex Boyd. Our music is by Ross Mincer, our logo art is by Caitlin Weinman, and we are supported by the Gotham, formerly IFP. Thanks for listening to Two Bi Guys.